All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we do a preview and prediction for the 2023 Wisconsin Badgers. This is a new look football program, Nick. You know, Paul Chryst was ousted after a very successful tenure, but the reasoning for his departure was very simple. This was a program that certainly had already reached its ceiling. There was no innovation on offense. Every year, they just continue to play elite defense, play the big dogs in the conference, get hammered, or maybe compete a little bit and give some false hope to the fan base. You know, 8 to 10 wins per year. Every once in a while, they go to a Rose Bowl or a New Year's Six. And that was about it, though. You know, this program was certainly one that was one of the better ones in college football under Paul Chryst, but they certainly were not innovating one bit anywhere. And that leads to Luke Fickell coming in. I was convinced that he was going to stay with Cincinnati with them joining the Big 12. He turned down some powerful jobs the year prior, LSU, USC, and even Notre Dame was open. He comes to Wisconsin, which was very shocking. This is a massive hire by the Badgers. And then he brings along with him Phil Longo from UNC. He's going to be here to transformation this offense. Then Mike Tressel follows Fickell over from Cincinnati. They've been together the last couple of seasons. 57-18 through 6 seasons at Cincinnati. He also led them to the College Football Playoff. This was a team that was certainly on the uprise, and they also competed pretty well against Alabama in that playoff game. What do you make of Wisconsin adding Luke Fickell? Because I think this is an A++ hire. I think he's going to do a great job here. We'll get into it, but what are your initial thoughts?
I think this is a fantastic hire. You know, this works a lot, I think, for Wisconsin, right? They go from a coach where obviously with Paul Chryst, you knew what you're going to get, right? This is going to be a great defense every single year. They're going to run the ball a ton. You know, I think Jonathan Taylor, that sort of, you know, running back, big, powerful, bruising back who just takes a ton of hits, has nice speed bursts when he gets out to the flats, right? That was the offense you're going to run with Wisconsin. They're going to be one-dimensional at best. They're going to run the ball all the time. The quarterback play was just weak. They're going to smother you on defense, produce incredible pass rushers, good defensive linemen. Now you bring a guy, Luke Fickell, who was quietly building one of the best programs at the Group of 5 level at Cincinnati. They made the playoff, first ever Group of 5 team to do so. Certainly a very impressive achievement. And he also brings over a great coaching staff. I think Phil Longo coming over from UNC. Obviously, we saw what he did at UNC last year with Drake May at quarterback, right? And that offense was high flying. And they really, you know, UNC could have been a whole lot better if that defense had a pulse at all. But that offense was fantastic at UNC. And you bring in Mike Tressel, who, of course, you know, the nephew of former Ohio State head coach Jim Tressel, right? A famous coach that Luke Fickell coached under himself. He was under Tressel during his time at Ohio State, so they have experience together. Those two, that, you know, family ties. I think that's a great defensive coordinator to have. You know, experienced guys, been in the game for a while. So this is a very strong coaching staff, one of the best in the Big Ten overall. I think Luke Fickell, like we said in January, we did a video on this. You know, this is a home run hire. This is going to work out great for Wisconsin. It gives them an opportunity to kind of really hit those new heights. And you know, they previously were a team that would be competitive. They make, you know, the Big Ten title game, and they get blown out by Ohio State, Michigan, the likes. Now they got a chance to be competitive and compete for a Big Ten title.
Now, looking at this offense, it's a very exciting unit. They did not look good in the spring game one bit, though, but if you look at the schedule the first couple weeks, they have a chance to get in sync. They are undergoing a complete schematic change. Phil Longo, of course, coming over, bringing this RPO-style offense, a spread attack, you know, a bit of an air raid as well. Plenty of QB run will be involved. This is going to be a very interesting unit. You know, they lose 9 players to the portal. Logan Brown being at tackle being the most notable. They did add 9, 3 quarterbacks, 4 wide receivers, and 2 offensive linemen from Cincinnati. So a lot of transformation here. Look at Tanner Mordecai. He played in a very similar scheme under Rhett Lashley at SMU. You know, this is a player who's very confident, has some good zip, great placement, quick decision maker. His feet and touch need some work, but at 6'3", 218, he certainly has the tools and the traits to make this offense thrive. I think the biggest thing to watch, though, is the running backs could certainly bloom here. Braylon Allen, he's committed to this program. He had said he was not transferring, despite some rumors that said that he was going to enter the portal. Them not having to see loaded boxes each play could allow them to really, you know, expose some of the space in this upcoming season. Not just Braylon Allen, but Ches Malusi as well. A slasher was a quick first step. Very nice burst. He gets downhill in a hurry. Very good speed for his size of 5'11", 210. Then back to Braylon Allen. He's compared to that of Derrick Henry, with him being 6'2", 235. A former linebacker, showcases violence when he runs, stays low, cuts with authority, bounces off arm tackles, a bulky upper half. He's really good at finding open lanes at the line of scrimmage. Again, Nick, I think all this open space, these guys being in the shotgun, these running backs could certainly really blossom this year. This is, you know, if they can start clicking in the passing attack too, then I think you're looking at an offense that has unbelievable balance.
Right, I think Tanner Mordecai is a fantastic quarterback. You know, real college football fans who have watched the game inside and out have seen Mordecai at SMU. You know, previously under Sonny Dykes, and then this past season under a new coaching staff, they still continue to produce. Mordecai is a very talented quarterback. I love the size, and I think the size we're playing is very impressive. 6'3", 218, really good measurables there with Mordecai. You know, like his decision making, good placement, solid in the pocket, very talented player. I think Allen's a great back to have. He's kind of your more traditional running back for Wisconsin. You know, 1,242 yards on the ground last year, 5.5 yards per carry, plus 11 scores for him. He's going to get the bulk of load again this year. And then Missoula as well is a very talented back. He had nearly 500 yards on the ground last year and 2 scores in more of a backup kind of role. He played in 9 games. Expect him to take a step forward as that number 2 back. I think those 2 guys together add a great 1-2 punch. And then you got Mordecai slinging the ball. I think this wide receiving core that has some talent here is in for a good line.
And looking at the receiving core, I certainly think this is a much better unit than people are going to give at face value. To pick up C.J. Williams from USC, this is a guy that can line up out wide or in the slot. Quite polished route runner, showcases some nice IQ, good jump ball abilities, a willing blocker as well. Shamir Dyke, or attorney, good frame, impressive production for the scheme he was in a season ago. Underrated athlete, some good yards after catch. I think he does a good job of finding that open space. Then Bryson Green, coming from Oklahoma State, nice bulky frame and size of 6'1", 205. Some good vertical speed. He's tough to tackle after the catch due to his physicality style. He also has some strength. They pull in Will Pauling. He's going to be a slot receiver from Cincinnati. Skylar Bell had nearly 15 yards per catch a season ago, and Keontez Lewis was the 3rd leading pass catcher a season ago. I think this offense, now that they, again, added 4 receivers in the portal, guys like Williams and Green matched up with some of the returnees here. I think, boom or bust maybe for this passing attack would be the goal. But I think there's a high upside unit right here. There's a lot of depth in this conference. You usually don't see receiving cores have this much depth, but I certainly think it's actually going to be a plus for this unit, and some people might not recognize that.
What I think is very interesting about this is that they return their top 3 receivers, but they also grabbed 4 guys out of the portal that are very talented. You know, I think Dyke is a very talented wide receiver. He led the team in receiving yards last year and receptions, 689 total yards, 6 scores for him. Bell and Lewis are both pretty respectable wide receivers in their own right for Big Ten level. You know, 5 scores for Bell, 14.8 yards per catch. Lewis, 15.7 yards per catch, and 3 scores for him as well. So you return those 3 guys. If you return those 3 guys alone, that would be a solid starting wide receiving core for a Big Ten program like Wisconsin. But when you add in Williams, Pauling, and Green as well from the transfer portal, I think you really start to see that this is a very underrated unit. If they got a great quarterback there and Mordecai passing to them, I think this passing offense could certainly take off under a new scheme. I think we're going to see a new look Wisconsin can put up a lot of points this year that you don't expect out of a team like Wisconsin.
The offensive line certainly thrived under Paul Chryst and years before that. That's always been a staple of this program. Things are not going to change even with a different scheme and a different philosophy here. You know, look at Jack Nelson. He made that conversion from right guard to left tackle last year. Flourished as a pass blocker. Good size at 6'7", 310. Athleticism matched with that is very good. You know, quick hands. The power does waver when the placement is sloppy, but he overall has a good base. Feet tend to stop moving when engaged, but this is a player that performed very well last year, and I think one more year under his belt is certainly going to pay dividends for him. Center Jake Renfro missed all of last year with injury. Great size for the position, mixed with his movement skills, works to the second level very well. Some nice heavy hands at 6'3", 310. He's one of those guys that comes over from Cincinnati, the other being Joe Huber at right tackle. Exceptional run blocker. Really had his struggles in pass pro, though. 6'5", 310. He's going to compete with Riley Mahalman, Michael Fruitney at 6'5", 315, Tanner Bortolino, 6'4", 313. These guys, 2 starters at guard last season. You know, Bortolini was a very good player overall. He can play anywhere on the interior offensive line. Trey Whittick, great versatility as well. This is a really good offensive line that has size, experience, and skill. It's going to be among one of the nation's top units, Nick. And again, people are probably going to think this new look Wisconsin won't have a stout offensive line. Well, I got news for you. That's not going to be the story one bit.
That certainly won't change anytime soon in Madison. They're known for their offensive line, the production they produce out of these big guys. They get these guys in, they're absolutely huge. They're able to create great running lanes for running backs. It's going to continue this year. I think there's a fantastic unit they've built here. I think Nelson's a great piece. He handled the transition well. Moving to left tackle from right guard is a tough transition. You could have expected a drop off. He handled it very well, made the transition perfectly. Bartolini is fantastic at left guard. The 2 of them on the left side is great pairing. Jake Renfro at center, I like him a lot. I think he's got serious potential coming out of the transfer portal. I like Mahlman as well on the right tackle spot. So I think this is a great offensive line that's got some serious production.
Now you look at the top of the screen, the numbers, they're not really impressive, good at all. They're awful. You look at the unit grade below, and I give it an A. That doesn't make a lot of sense, Nick. That doesn't pair up one bit. But obviously, all these changes, that leads me to this grade. Do you think it's a little too high? Because obviously the schematic change, especially how they looked in the spring game, that may be a reach, but I think they can put things together. This is going to be an elite unit. I'm very excited for it.
I think it's a fair grade when you look at this, the way that they brought in all these moving pieces and have a new scheme fit. Of course, you look at the stats, right? They're not great. 363 yards per game on offense, 91st in the country is not great. The points per game, 26. Those are numbers that you want to see higher, but I think they can certainly get those numbers higher this upcoming season. I think an A makes sense considering the talent they brought in and the fact they got a great guy calling the plays in Phil Longo. So I think this is an appropriate grade for this offense.
Now, looking at the defense, unfortunately, Jim Leonard does not stick around. He originally was going to, but Luke Fickell, obviously he's a defensive guru. Mike Tressel, they've worked a long time together with that 3-3-5. Some Wisconsin fans in the spring told us they're likely going to stick with that 3-4, which would make a lot of sense because we were certainly questioning how that 3-3-5 would hold up in the Big Ten. So I think that's certainly going to be highly beneficial for them. You look at the portal, they lost 7 guys. No one major, though. They did add 4 players, including Darian Varner from Temple. This unit returns 7 starters. They do lose an impact player at each level. Keanu Benton at nose, Nick Herbig off the edge, John Torchino and Jay Shaw in the secondary. Very good players. 17 interceptions for this unit, 32 sacks a season ago. Obviously, playmaking was not lacking one bit. You look at the defensive line, though. Gia Paz, a big body to replace Benton at 6'3", 316. He will need to prove himself. Same goes for veteran defensive end Isaiah Mullins. You also look at James Thompson. He stepped up last fall, especially as a run stopper. Roadhouse Johnson's back. So they certainly have a lot of experience and some depth. Obviously, production, though, is going to be a big key for these guys. Darian Varner from Temple, a great athlete, good closing burst, fights for inside leverage versus bigger offensive lineman. He'll likely have to shift to a full-time defensive end or outside linebacker due to his size of 6'2", 260. But I think overall this defensive line has a lot of upside. Not many big names here, but I think that's always kind of been the staple for Wisconsin also, is a tough defensive front. Not too many guys that excel. The loss of Benton, though, I think is going to be major.
Losing Benton is certainly difficult. I think if they stick with the 3-4, that'll be beneficial for this team. I think the 3-3-5 just wouldn't really work in the Big Ten. I think it's just not a defensive scheme that's going to kind of benefit you greatly in what is a physical conference. I think this is a decent defensive line. There's some talent here. I think Gio Paz is a good player there. I think he's got a solid player at nose tackle. I like the production out of him. I think Varner coming over from Temple is a solid piece. I like his size, 6'2", 260. Good athlete, good speed. This is not a bad defensive line. It definitely has a lot of holes. They have to replace a lot of production. But I think this is overall not a bad group on the front end.
It's going to be a lot easier for them with this experienced linebacking core behind him. Mama Njigometa, PFS top returning inside linebacker. Elite when coming downhill. He did damage as a run stopper and a pass rusher. 95 tackles, 11.5 behind the line. CJ Gotez at linebacker, also good burst and motor to produce more as a stand-up edge. Was a great run stopper this past season. Nick Herbig's rolls up for grabs, though. Darrell Peterson had 331 snaps as a redshirt freshman. Jeff Petrowski comes over from Michigan State. He was a force in 2021, only 3 games this past season. They're deep at inside linebacker, though. Jack Chaney, Tatum Grass, those guys got on the field for quality reps. Brian Sanborn as well. Remember, his brother Jack was an elite player for them. Mainly special team contributor. Jordan Taylor produced and was always solid, but not as impactful in his first year as a starter. He was admirable nonetheless. I think this is a great linebacking core that has depth, and of course, Najee Gometa is elite for them. So I think overall this front 7 is going to be very good for Luke Fickell. We'll see how they maneuver this year.
Najee Gometa is a fantastic piece. Your top returning tackler, top tackler on the team last year. 95 total tackles for him. 12.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. Just an absolute beast in the backfield. I love that potential. Jake Chaney as well. Very good piece. 38 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, and a sack for him. He's a solid piece to return. Overall, I think this is a great front 7. There's a lot of talent, a lot of depth here, a lot of moving pieces. Tatum Grass as another player that could potentially get some time. There's some true freshmen as well that have potential. There are Jordan Mayer, Tyler Jancy as well. They're very talented, high-level recruits coming in. So overall, this front 7 is fantastic. This is a great unit that's going to get after the quarterback and be able to make a nice play in the backfield.
Now, the good news is they do have that front 7 to match up with the secondary. That's going to be kind of an iffy unit. Luke Fickell at Cincinnati, his secondary over the last couple of years, among the nation's top every single year in interceptions and fewest completion percentage allowed. They put a lot of guys in the NFL this past season, including Sauce Gardner. That's certainly his forte. The Bearcats were incredibly elite in the back end. Alexander Smith, a 6-year player, he's going to be the leader in the secondary. Jason Matry, a fellow 6-year veteran from Boston College, he's likely going to man the slot. His health is very important. Ricardo Hallman, he got burned versus 2 elite wide receivers versus Michigan State. Played sparingly after that. He will likely occupy that CB2. Travion Blaylock missed last year due to a torn ACL, was working with the starting unit last spring, so he's probably going to have a role reserved for him now that he's fully healthy. Hunter Wooler, he was good till a leg injury after 6 games. They need more consistency from Kamui Latu. He had 500-plus snaps a season ago. Added 6 players in this freshman class, plenty of turnover and lots to sort out in the secondary. Much more hopeful for the safety group than the corner group, though. What are your thoughts on this back end? I think obviously they have the luxury of this front seven, and of course, great scheming. But I think against Ohio State, maybe who they do play late in the year, maybe Michigan if they draw up with them, it's going to be tough out against those teams.
Certainly is tough. The secondary was decimated by injuries this past year. Waller, 6 games played. Hallman only played 10 games this past season, right? So Smith only played 7 games, right? So these guys have struggled to stay healthy. Smith only, 6-year senior, only played 7 games last year. He wants to have one big final breakout send-off for him. Overall, as long as you guys can stay healthy, I think there is some talent here. Injury has certainly been a problem for these guys. I think coaching will certainly help, which is why I'm not as worried about the secondary as one might be based off what you look at on paper. They certainly got to improve the secondary, right? They've allowed a lot of big plays in the past. That's certainly something they got to focus on. But overall, I think it's a good group that has a lot of potential, and I think the coaching makes me feel a lot better because, Luke Fickell is probably the best guy you're going to grab in college football to coach up a secondary.
Last year, the secondary allowed more big plays than they would, like. So I'm going to go with an A- because that secondary is still a very iffy unit for me. I'm not that concerned, especially when you see the schedule. I don't think it's going to plague them really at all. I love the front seven. I think they're pretty deep in those areas. And again, the scheming I think is going to be tremendous this season. So A- for me. Secondary holding back a little bit, but the upside is tremendous here. This defense has never been poor once, I don't think, ever in my lifetime of watching Wisconsin football. So this year, it's not going to be any different, and especially going forward.
I agree. This is a great defense. I'd probably go closer to B+. I am concerned about the secondary, but I think you're going to get out of that Wisconsin front seven. They're going to be in the backfield every single play. They're going to get after the quarterback. They're going to be, the quarterback will be uncomfortable all game. They're going to clog up those running lanes. This front seven's fantastic. They're very talented. They're very deep. A lot of potential with the front seven.
Look at the schedule preview and prediction. This is a loaded offense at all levels. The scheme transition will ultimately dictate how far they go. But the backfield should thrive this season. They're not tasked with defeating 8, 9-man boxes. Wide receiver group will be significantly undervalued. It's a deep unit that will produce. The offensive line features great size and experience. Of course, there's 2 adds from Cincinnati mixed with some returning starters. Very exciting. Defense will slightly shift scheme, at least from a coaching standpoint. The front seven has great depth and upside. Secondary, of course, is a tad concerning, at least at corner. The safety group is a little more polished, and I think that's certainly going to pay dividends for them. A great team. They have national title upside. I definitely think that Luke Fickell's going to come in and make an immediate impact. 11-1 for me. The schedule's not all that difficult. Look at the first 3 weeks. They have a chance to get this offense in sync, especially against Georgia Southern, who had, I think, one of the worst-ranked passing defenses last season. They were also awful against the run, so that's going to be a great opportunity for them. Looking to get payback on the Palouse at Washington State. That's going to be a game to monitor. Purdue, draft Brom's no longer there, so how that passing attack look? Iowa, ancient offense. Rutgers not expected to do much this season. At Illinois and hosting Ohio State. Those 2 games right there, the biggest ones on the season. I think you can circle the season finale at Minnesota as well. Other than that, this team's either going to go 9-3 with those losses at those games, or they're going to go undefeated. Luke Fickell, you've said before, Nick, he wants that Ohio State job. He's gunning for it. This is likely going to be a primetime game, especially if they're undefeated. This is going to mean a lot to Fickell here in his first year to try and upset the Buckeyes. And again, at Illinois, those 2 games back-to-back are going to be the biggest of the year. Those are the ones I'm circling. Give me your thoughts.
Certainly potential program-defining games and back-to-back weeks. If they go 2-0 in those games against Illinois and Ohio State, the program's going to be absolutely on the right track. I mean, Camp Randall is going to be jumping on October 28th. This is one of the biggest games at Camp Randall in the last, 10, 15 years. It's a huge game, a huge opportunity for Luke Fickell to play against a school he coached at, a school he has so many ties to. Like I said earlier in the episode in January that we did on this team, I think Luke Fickell is, he's nailed on to be the next coach of Ohio State after Ryan Day is done. I think it's just too perfect of an opportunity for him in the future. They can beat Ohio State if they're unbeaten at that point and they're really rattling off wins and they're running at 8-0, right, going into November. The sky's the limit for this team, with a back half of the schedule at Indiana, hosting Northwestern Nebraska. At Minnesota, you could definitely trip up there, right? That's a tough place to play. Minneapolis, cold, going to be snowing, right? Tough place to play in the winter. Overall, though, the schedule's not too bad. Non-conference, pretty light. Front half of the Big Ten schedule, Purdue, Rutgers, Iowa. Easy games for this Wisconsin team overall. Luke Fickell's building a program here. They get Alabama and Camp Randall next year, right? So this is the first team they want to set the tone to be national title contenders in the future. There's so much talent on this team. The schedule's pretty favorable, not a bad draw. They don't get Michigan. They don't get Michigan State. They get Ohio State at home. Certainly a huge plus for me. I think if they had to go to Columbus, right, that'd be a nailed-on loss. But hosting Ohio State, that game's a lot closer. I think a lot of people are giving them credit for. This team could certainly go 12-0, and they could be in Indianapolis with a rematch at Ohio State or against Michigan with a potential clinching spot in the playoff on the line. I certainly think Indianapolis is a very, very realistic expectation for this Wisconsin team in year one of Luke Fickell.
Even if they go 11-1, I do anticipate a rematch against either the Buckeyes or the Wolverines. So they will have a couple opportunities to punch a playoff ticket. So I think it's made it for this episode, Nick. Appreciate you joining me. It's really fun to break down this football team. Very excited for Wisconsin. This is the team I'm most excited to watch this season, matter of fact. What are your final thoughts?
Yeah, certainly a top 5 team that I'm paying attention to in college football, up there with Illinois, Florida State, right? These are LSU. These are teams that I have a very close eye on this year. Teams that have, interesting expectations and a whole new set of coaching staff here. I said it in an earlier episode, I love the 3 coaches headlining this team. I think Fickell, Longo, and Trussell together, that's a great trio. I think all 3 of them have very high upside and have a lot of potential. I think Wisconsin fans should be thrilled. Camp Randall is going to be rocking this year. That stadium's going to shake all game. It'll be tough to play up there. And if I'm an Ohio State fan, I'm worried about that trip in the end of October. They could be caught lacking there and slip up.
That's going to be it for this episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.